Hey, it's Wednesday. I'm Sunny D.
And I'm Captain J.
And we're the Pot Smoking Moms. Thanks for joining us on Wednesdays. We're trying to bring you content every Wednesday.
Yes.
Get you guys in here. And we have some great interviews we think that you should hear in their entirety. So we are focusing on our interview this Wednesday. When we were doing this podcast, kind of the whole reason we came up with this podcast
Your idea, really.
is because I was pregnant as someone who was smoked weed a lot and recently, got pregnant. I was like, well, what do I do? What are women doing? Because it's not something that we just talk about. Like, we don't talk about being pregnant and smoking weed. But then I started searching for boards and people and women who are pregnant or had babies and are smoking weed. So then we kind of fell into this thing where we're like, oh, these are good topics we should talk about. And then we came up with the podcast. And so this week, I really wish I would have talked to Sydney when I was pregnant. A lot of things too are kind of after the fact, after we had kids.
We had kids so long ago, and I feel like there's so much more resources out there now for
Right.
Cannabis consumption and women.
And we're talking about it a lot more.
Yeah. So I feel like now it's become a little more common. Like Sydney herself's only been doing this for the last few years. But like ever since you said like, hey, let's start this podcast because there's really no information out there. So we just started bringing people on our show and asking questions and learning. And we've been wanting to get a cannabis like doula or on the show for a while now.
Because we're so far from like having kids or whatever now at this point. But there's still fresh, brand new moms out there and that's like really when you're looking for the resources is when you're pregnant. Because like really, why would you care about what it means to smoke weed and be pregnant at the same time, unless you were in that scenario, right?
Or planning to be.
Exactly. And looking for community, looking for past history of women or what is it, anecdotal evidence of cannabis use during pregnancy. And so we were so grateful to have Sydney on our show. She's been educating and coaching birth workers and moms on cannabis use during childbearing season for the last couple of years. They're now expanding their resources and support to cover maternal health as a whole. So she talks a lot about menstruation, the whole cycle, and to the first few years of postpartum. So we had a lot of great things to talk to her about use while pregnant. Maybe some medications out there that are harmful to the baby that you should be taking. Maybe those are, cannabis might be a substitute
100%,
for those kinds of medications. And you're not sure where to go or what resources to look to. Look no further. Here is a resource for you. Sydney Parlier, she has so much education and this is what she's focused on, So it was really great to have her on the show.
Yeah, and her organization, her company is called Cannabirth. So we hope you enjoy the interview.
Here it is.
Thank you for coming on the show with us. I've been following your Instagram account for a while, and I've been really interested in having a cannabis doula on the show to talk about how cannabis can be helpful during pregnancy or post-pregnancy or even during childbirth. So can you tell us a little bit about you, yourself, how you got into this, and about Cannabirth?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thank you for following along and being in community. It's definitely a very niche topic, whether you're like in the cannabis industry or you're in the birth work world. It just seems to be a really like polarizing topic. So thank you for being there and having me on the show today. So I got into this. I was actually freelance writing in the cannabis space first. I just became a doula in 2021. So, but I've been freelance writing and working in the cannabis space for about 5 years now. So a little bit longer. But I'm a well, not lifelong consumer, but I've been consuming since I was young. So, my own personal experience, has taught me a lot. And then I started taking educational courses from Trichome Institute and other people in this line of work. and trying to learn all the things I could about cannabis and maternal health is really what it is. It's not just pregnancy, it's not, just postpartum. It's the full spectrum of maternal health. It's from the time you start menstruating until, well beyond childbirth into your motherhood years that cannabis can be such a great tool, right? And we know this. This is why you do what you do. So yeah.
So can you give me a little more information about like some of the things that you guys do at Cannabirth, what you offer between all those different scenarios you were talking about, whether it's pre having a child, went post
Yeah.
having a child, while pregnant, during delivery? What are some of the things that you found cannabis has been able to help with?
Oh man, I feel like if we were to really list all the ways it could help, we would just be here for hours, you know? I mean, there's hundreds, thousands of uses that anybody uses cannabis for, and moms use them for the same reasons.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, when we're at Cannabirth, we primarily support moms who are seeking support, whether it's like they have been a consumer for a long time and didn't expect to get pregnant, and then they are pregnant. So then they are like totally looking at their consumption differently.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as you find out you become pregnant, you're like, oh, wait a minute, I got to change like how I do this.
Yeah.
So they want more information about that. They want to be able to sift through the misinformation because if you Google this topic, it's like you just get all of these articles and fear
Like
mongering.
taboo, yeah,
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
You
So
have to
so they want
really
to they
dig
want to come
through.
some. You really do. And there's like red flags for research that we teach our moms, to look for because you should definitely go off and try to read what you can and educate yourself. But there's red flags for research, having other substances included in the survey or the research, um, all kinds of stuff. So at Cannabirth, we try to just connect them with the resources that they're looking for, which is really what a doula's role is even outside of cannabis informed support. Our role is really, it's not a medical role. So I'm not giving people medical advice. I'm simply connecting them to the information that they're looking for and giving them support on navigating shame and stigma and the guilt of consuming that so many moms feel because of all of this misinformation. And maybe what their doctor told them or what their friends told them, or maybe they know someone that had issues with CPS after they deliver. So we kind of help them figure out what their hospital's policies are like so that they can avoid that situation if that's what they're worried about. So it's a wide variety of things that we try to support on. I am only one person. However, I have a board of directors now that's totally willing to help me with stuff. So we're going to start implementing more comprehensive, more holistic support on the mom's end. And then we also educate birth workers and other healthcare professionals on how to support someone who is trying to become pregnant, or early postpartum as a cannabis consumer. So,
That's so important because I feel like so many people in the medical industry just don't know anything about the benefits of cannabis, and they just automatically assume that if a mom's using cannabis, they're abusing it. They're not using it for medicinal purposes or that
yeah.
it's helpful in any way. Like we get so many comments on the content we create as mothers that consume cannabis. I even put a comment on somebody's video, that they were talking about how much morning sickness they were having. And I was like, oh, you should consider cannabis. And bro, got attacked in the comments for even suggesting it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of wild, isn't it? I find that in my own community when I work with other birth workers who maybe like don't they're like new to this subject and they just happen to be at the meeting and we're talking about this question always comes up. They're always like, why would someone even choose cannabis while they're pregnant?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like,
Why
well,
not?
they probably already were. They were probably already using it for some benefit, and now they're pregnant. So it's not that they just like suddenly become a consumer once they're pregnant. Usually they already are. They're already using it as an alternative. It's helping them in some way, whatever the reason is. So, and then like you said, nausea, vomiting is huge. I'm hoping that someday that can be I mean, we don't need to get too far into like politics and stuff, but hopefully that will be an accepted use for
Yeah,
pregnant women
100%.
someday. You know,
Compared
we're
to the drugs that they prescribe these women,
yeah,
it's much more healthy. I know we need more research, but like just anecdotally, like what we've heard from mothers over the years, it's helped them so much. They're able to eat, they're able not to be
yeah.
sick, they're able to gain weight during their pregnancy instead of lose weight. While these, what is it starts with like a Z, Zofan or
Yeah, Zofran.
Zofran. Yeah, that's the one they normally prescribe women for this, and that's been known from what I've heard to possibly cause defects. And
Yeah.
so why
Yeah,
would you
and
choose that over a plant?
yeah. And that's not the first time, Zofran there is some correlation of birth defects and some negative outcomes, but this isn't the first time we've had this issue. Way back in the 60s and 70s, we had thalidomide, which is a completely acceptable medication for nausea during pregnancy, and it caused so many birth defects and deformities that there were like there were so many lawsuits that they had to shut it down, pull it off the shelves. Obviously,
Wow.
they did eventually, after thousands of cases. But yeah, there's limited research on so many things, not just cannabis and pregnancy. We
Mhm.
also have pharmaceuticals that are totally acceptable by healthcare staff, um, but that we don't have research for.
Now, would you give any recommendations like of what is a preferable or a better way to consume cannabis when you are pregnant? Like, let's say you're a regular cannabis user and then you find out you're pregnant, so you feel like, okay, should I stop? Like, what would you recommend to somebody that's coming to you with these questions?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And to kind of touch on what we were just talking about, because it's relevant to this conversation, like I hardly ever have someone come to me that says, like, I'm pregnant now and I just want to keep smoking like I'm smoke. I don't really have like a solid reason for using. I just want to keep smoking, or I don't want to like change my habit. Almost everyone that comes is trying to be more mindful. They're trying to get their dosage under control. And so really what we start with is kind of learning about what their motives are, because it's like not easy to answer that question because everybody is so unique. So the method that's best for them, whether it's edibles, inhalation, what products are best for them, is all going to depend on what their goals are, what their motives are for consuming, and then, where they live, what they have access to, because not everybody lives in an area where they have access to different types of products, or,
Or if
you
it's even
know,
legal, where they
or if
can
it's,
go to a dispensary and have
yeah,
that access. Yeah.
exactly. So that's going to play into their situation. It's totally, I've never, every person and their situation and their circumstances is so unique, so unique.
I know that when I got pregnant, I didn't have as much knowledge as I know now after we did started this podcast about cannabis and pregnancy. So I just did, okay, you're supposed to quit, and you're not supposed to be doing this. So I just quit cold turkey, like
Yeah.
that's it. And I honestly think that that might have been not good for me. I probably should have tapered off a little more. I didn't end up struggling a lot with hypertension and end up getting preeclampsia. And I don't know if that may have been a contributing factor, not the reason, but a contributing
Right.
factor as to why that happened and why I ended up having to have an emergency C-section, early, because my blood pressure and was going much higher. So, and again, like you said, it's never like, oh, it's not about I just want to get high. Most of these people have their reasons why they use cannabis.
Hmm.
And, usually when you're using it when you're pregnant, you're doing a lot less than what you were doing before. At least
Yeah.
that's been my experience of some of the women I know that decided to continue using cannabis during their
Yeah.
pregnancy.
Yeah, it's often like very intuitive for people. Some people do want to stop. And like or if you're in a state where there's 3 states right now, I think it's Alabama, Tennessee, and North Carolina. No, South Carolina, where it's actually like a punishable crime. to consume cannabis during pregnancy. So you could actually be like arrested and jailed after you, you know, which is totally ridiculous.
Wow.
So if you're in a place like that, like you may want to stop using, you know, you may have to, you may not have a choice. And in that case, it is better to taper off. You know, when we quit cold turkey, it's like kind of shocks the system, especially if you've been like a moderate or, you know, chronic consumer for a while. So yeah, definitely better to taper, supplement with some other herbs and stuff that's not gonna, you know, get you thrown in jail. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit about the survey you conducted in 2022? Tell us about that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I created a survey just out of like pure curiosity. It was just like a Google form and I made it completely anonymous and I just started sharing it to like all these Canamom communities and with my friends who are, you know, in the influencing community and it just blew up. And before I knew it, I had over 800 respondents. And I stopped it at 825 because I was like, I want to actually like people were writing long stories and testimonies and I wanted to actually read them. So I'm like, okay, I got to stop this here before it's just too much. And yeah, there were over 600 testimonies and stories that people left. And I ended up going through the survey and pulling out like some of the common themes that I was finding, a lot of like the common questions, issues, challenges that people came across. And that's how I started Cannabirth essentially was using all of that information to kind of build a framework that could bridge the gap a little bit. So it doesn't solve any problems per se yet, but it does help bridge the gap right now, which is huge.
Can you share some of the most common themes that you saw repeated throughout the data that you received?
Oh man,
Those that stood out the most?
there was yeah, lots of fear of CPS. I
Mhm.
remember fear of CPS was like I highlighted those exact three words so many times. Um shame, lots of guilt, lots of isolation, people not discussing it with anyone, not feeling safe enough to talk to anybody about it. Um Lots of interestingly enough, lots of people that said, now that I'm older, I wish I would have used it in my pregnancy. Like I had been on, you know, some other pharmaceutical or whatever. And like, if I would have known what I know now, I wish I would have used cannabis as a tool in pregnancy. Which that kind of surprised me because I didn't really expect that many people to express that. Lots of breastfeeding challenges like, you know, struggling with guilt during breastfeeding because just of the conflicting information
I wish I would
is
have
really hard.
tried breastfeeding while consuming cannabis because, again, I did not consume cannabis until I was done trying to breastfeed. And I was very unsuccessful with breastfeeding because since my son came early and I had complications, we were separated for the first 3 days. So we didn't have that chance to really, he was bottle fed during those 3 days. So it kind of like
Yeah.
really makes it harder. And I wasn't producing enough milk. And I was just like, that was another thing I was wondering. If I was consuming cannabis, would I have been more relaxed? Would I have been able to consume more milk? Would feeding my son not have been such a stressful experience every time I tried to do it?
Yeah, because that's like
Because
the
of the fact that
hardest to me. The
because
hardest
of the
part of having the kid is when you have to breastfeed, hands down.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
then I felt guilt for not succeeding as a breastfeeder. But maybe if I had been using cannabis, maybe I would have been able to been a little more successful because maybe I wouldn't have been. I don't know. Maybe it would have helped me produce milk.
Yeah.
Maybe I would have just been like more relaxed, so I would have been able to produce more milk. Things like that. I
Yeah.
wondered.
I hear that sometimes and actually even in my own experience, I felt like I could like let down my milk a lot easier when I would consume and then breastfeed. And of course like everyone wants to know about breastfeeding and cannabis. Like, is it safe? How to do it? I usually will say, like, if you're concerned about transfer, just try to give like the biggest window in between the time you consume to the time that you feed, because in the little research that we do have, it looks like after 4 to 5 hours, there's just like it's barely traceable. However, like I said, in my own journey, I actually benefited from consuming and then just eating straight away because it helped me let my milk down and relax. And cannabis as a postpartum tool beyond breastfeeding, like it's amazing. It can be. It definitely can be. It's not for everyone, but it can
Yeah.
be a tool for so many people to help balance their systems out after birth, help support their mental health. So yeah, definitely it's a tool that I recommend. I'm a little biased, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a bias as well. Let me tell
I
you, the
mean, just
first
a
time
little
I
bit.
smoked just a little bit after not smoking my entire pregnancy, and then not the whole time I was breastfeeding. As soon as I gave up on breastfeeding and I smoked, I was like, I should have been doing this the whole time. I didn't smoke a lot.
Yeah.
I had a little tiny bowl, a couple of hits, and that's all I needed.
Yeah. It's kind of amazing how little it takes sometimes to make a shift, you know, and to be effective. Like pharmaceuticals don't do that, you know, they have their place, but it's like you can't do what you can do with cannabis with pharmaceuticals. You can't dial up and down the dosage. You can't use different variations of the product, you know? And that's a huge tool. It's a huge advantage to being able to consume. So, yeah.
So, what are the? You're in the state of Illinois. So how is it over there? As far as cannabis and pregnancy, do you know? I mean, the laws, like, do they test mothers? Because I know in some states, I think you run the risk, like the fear of CPS, like you said, they may test you in the hospital just to see. What are the laws there in Illinois, and do mothers have protections?
So there is no specific law in Illinois that prohibits you from consuming cannabis, which means basically that it's not a punishable crime. Um, they don't routinely test at many hospitals, but I won't say all because it does happen. They tend to test in certain situations, like if you have a home birth and then you transfer to the hospital, so you weren't planning to come to the hospital and you kind of go there last minute, they routinely drug test you upon admission. If you disclose your consumption to your provider and they write it in your chart, even if it was like preconception, like if you're like, you know, yeah, I used to consume cannabis like before pregnancy or whatever, like if it's in your chart at all,
They
it'll
smoke
it'll
cannabis.
yeah, it'll flag your file, and then when you have a birth at the hospital, they will routinely drug test you
I've
just
never
for
thought of that.
having that in your file.
Because
Yeah.
I'm like, we're big advocates of being honest with your
Mhm.
doctors if you're a consumer of cannabis, but to think that just by being honest that you consumed before you were pregnant and that being in your file, that could put a red flag to have you tested. That's crazy. I didn't even think of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, so here sometimes providers are actually okay with it. They're like, "Oh, you want to use, you know, cannabis for your nausea? It's working for you. I'm good with it." But they chart it, that conversation, and then they're still drug tested. So it's like you think you're doing the right thing by talking to your doctor and making sure that, you know, you have informed care and but unfortunately, the other laws and the policies that surround the plant kind of prohibit or prevent people from doing this safely, you know?
How do you feel? How do you think the descheduling from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3 is going to affect cannabis in medicinal, in environments like what you guys do?
Yeah. I think for hospital policy and drug testing policies specifically, I think that it will help. I
Yeah.
think that we'll be able to possibly remove it from the drug panel list.
Mhm.
I mean, I found a report on maternal mortality and morbidity for the state of Illinois. Um, and what did it have in it? Shoot, I just lost my train of thought. It's gonna come back.
It's okay.
I don't know. But the point is, I think that for cannabis and pregnancy specifically, I think the rescheduling will help. I'm definitely a fan of descheduling
Yeah,
completely, but I just don't think
reschedule.
that's gonna happen.
They should
Um,
deschedule. It shouldn't be rescheduled. It should
I
be
know.
descheduled. But like,
I think I that would be ideal, but it's like if we get to a place where it does just go to Schedule 3, which is what they're saying right now, I think it will help for laws and policies. I think that we could remove cannabis from drug panel lists, potentially. I don't know that tracking it is like a bad or good thing. I think we do want some long-term like research and numbers on how many people are using cannabis, but it shouldn't be used as a tool to get people in trouble. That's for sure.
100%. It should be
Because it's
tracked
not
for
killing people.
research.
Yeah, it's
Exactly.
not killing. Yeah. So, oh, this is what I was going to say with the report, was that we have more deaths due to overdose in the first year of a mom's life than any other statistic. So it's like 62% of all deaths, maternal deaths in the first year, were attributed to drug overdose. Not even medical conditions like heart problems or stroke. This is drug overdose. These are preventable, right?
What kind of drugs? Like
So,
what,
well,
opioids?
not cannabis,
Definitely
you
not
know?
cannabis, but like I'm
So it's
assuming
like
it's
they're
opioids.
yeah, so fentanyl is actually the highest it looks like, and then there's a good number that's like more than one substance. So, yeah.
I would have never thought that.
Yeah. So it's like, you look at the chart where it says what drugs contributed to the deaths, and it's all the fentanyl, cocaine, heroin, things like that, and there's no cannabis. So it's like, well, then why are we even still like testing for it?
Yeah.
Why are we still getting moms like wrapped up in CPS and opening cases against them for something that's never killed them and can actually help them get off of those things if that's what they're struggling with. So, yeah.
I mean,
Big
scheduling it at 3, even though it is a step in the right direction, we would rather it be descheduled, but like at least they're acknowledging its medicinal value. That it
Right.
is medicinal and it does serve a purpose and it's not as likely to be abused, which I
Yeah.
think is a big deal. It's great, but we
Yeah.
want more. We
Yeah,
know
but
it's
it
good,
doesn't
but it's not.
benefit the people. At the end of the day, all that does is give the big corporate dispensaries who now have a hold of most of all of the weed sales, and they get off. And sure, yeah, we'll say that covers research too, research in there. It's just like not benefiting people. People are still getting locked up for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it kind of like makes me wonder too, if they do that, then what happens to dispensaries?
Hmm.
Are they gonna put pharmacists? So this is like
It could be
this would be
fun.
this would be in the same schedule as like Tylenol with codeine. So
Hmm.
it's like you have to have a prescription for Tylenol with codeine. So does that mean that we're gonna have to start putting pharmacists in our dispensaries, or are they gonna exist and we only have pharmacies to go to? It's kind of like there's gonna be a lot for them to. That's why it's like just deschedule it. That sounds like a nightmare to try to
Yeah.
move it into another schedule, put restrictions on it, and
Yeah.
then try to control it because it's a plant. So you can't control there's like you can't control it unless you isolate the fuck out of it and process it, and then
Yeah.
it's like not even a good product anymore, you
Nobody
know?
wants
So
that. Nobody wants
nobody
the
wants
chilled
that.
version. We want some plants.
Exactly.
Just let us grow it, let us consume it, and that's it.
Yeah.
Stop
Yeah.
putting all these hurdles in front of us.
Yeah.
It grows out of the
Exactly.
ground.
It goes out.
Yeah. It's a plant. So I
So
think
first,
yeah, go
no,
ahead.
go ahead, continue or finish your thought.
Go ahead.
Oh, because I was completely gonna change the subject kind of, but if you want to finish your thought on this. Okay. I was gonna say, so you personally, what is your experience with the plant? When did you discover cannabis and start consuming? Tell us a little bit about Sydney's story with cannabis.
Oh, she's my life partner, pretty much. Seriously. I say that all the time because I think the first time that I consumed or smoked weed was when I'm 33. I just turned 33 a few days ago. And I've been consuming since I was like 16. So this is like I think I was maybe 15 the first time, and it's like funny because I don't really remember the first time I smoked, but I remember the first time I was high. Like sometimes you don't always know until you're like, "Oh, this is what it
This is
feels like."
it. I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, and so it's been like I say she's my life partner, but what I mean by that is that our relationship has ebbed and flowed over the years. I definitely was not a mindful consumer when I was in high school. I was really trying to like escape, numb myself. Like I was consuming all kinds of stuff when I was in my adolescence. So it's been a journey, and I've had to take breaks, and there's times I've relied on her more. And then when I started educating myself about it and doing some freelance writing, and I was like, wow, there's like this whole other world to this plant. This isn't just like, some ditchweed. There's like there's a whole world. I mean, at that time it was illegal. So we didn't legalize here in Illinois until 2019. And that was really like the first time I had access to like anything other than, black market, just flour.
Mhm.
So it opened up a whole world once I started to like learn about edibles, and then I started making my own edibles. And then, now I'm pretty much here where I'm like, pretty moderate consumer. We smoke a joint every night. Um, I make edibles still. I actually make them for new moms as part of like a postpartum package. They get
Oh,
some
that's
broth and
cute.
they get some edibles. So, yeah, yeah, it's been a
So,
fun
what's
journey.
your preferred method of consumption, would you say?
Smoking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's just I edibles don't work for
I
me.
do love an edible though. I do love the way that an edible can
I'm so jealous.
last a little longer. Yeah. What are you
Edibles don't
not?
work for me. I've tried so many edibles, and I've noticed the only thing an edible will do for me is put me to sleep, and that's it.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't feel the same effects at all. I've
Yeah.
I've seen people stupid high off of edibles where they're like giggly. You can see it in their face. They have it all there. You see, and I'm like,
Uh-huh.
how
That's
is
me.
this? Never. Not me. I'll just go to sleep.
I totally get like my eyes completely disappear and I'm just like laughing. And that's how like my boyfriend, he's like, "Did you take an edible?" Because I'll just be like, it's just not like when I smoke. Like when I smoke, I'm chilling. I want to talk. I want to get into a conversation usually.
Mhm.
But yeah, edibles make me giggly. So that's fun.
It's always funny to see the videos online. Like, oh, my parents ate too many edibles, and they're being like really goofy high, and you can just see it. And you're like, wow, I'm jealous. I wish
Yeah.
I could get that feeling. I don't
Yeah.
know what it is. I I've come to the realization I feel like just is going to sleep.
Yeah.
That's it.
Well, some people, do you know, some people carry like an enzyme in their liver that doesn't allow them to break
Um,
down the edible. So
That's probably me.
it just like bypasses your system
Yeah,
completely.
that's
So it's
probably
like they really don't work for you, you know? Yeah.
You say usually too. You talk to women about menstrual care, also using cannabis through menstrual care. And I noticed that you had recommended suppositories. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and like, who would be the best candidates to go that route?
Yes, absolutely. Suppositories are an unsung hero for all women. But someone that suffers from menstrual cramping, PCOS, anything that's painful down there, suppositories are going to be a really great option. And this isn't just like vaginally or backdoor. This is both. Vaginally, honestly, is my preferred method if I'm having some cramping. It's really great for postpartum cramping when your uterus is shrinking back down to size. That's like one of those things nobody ever tells you as a first-time mom, is that your contractions are not really going to stop after birth, that you're still going to have these contractions. And actually, that was one of the first uses, the first documented uses for cannabis was subinvolution. So subinvolution is the uterus's inability to shrink back down. So it's having trouble shrinking back down after birth, and cannabis was applied and it helped it shrink back down.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah.
It's amazing.
So suppositories are awesome. They're, I mean, I take
It-
one sometimes just to do it. So
just to chill out. It's like a
yeah,
full body high.
it is. Yeah. And it's not, but it's not like, I wouldn't say it's like a full body high, like an edible, quite like it's not as like buzzy body high. It's more of just like an overall relaxation body high.
Can you, and this is my question too, like, would you have to like find someone who makes suppositories, or so can you
You're breaking up, but I'm assuming you're asking if because
you
there's a
know,
way to make them if you don't know where to buy them. Right? I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's what she's asking.
Yeah.
I didn't hear the end
yeah,
of it
like
either.
if you could use RSO. Sorry, I know my internet kind of sucks, so that's why I've been refraining from speaking most of our conversation. If you didn't notice,
I
but
talk a
my
lot
question
too,
is,
so I never know.
so my question is like, so suppositories. I don't think that's a product that is like widely available. I know that RSO can be consumed in different ways. I know that in
Mhm.
instead of like mouth wise, I've heard of people who even use RSO in like their belly button. Is that another way that maybe you can consume for that situation?
I have not heard of the belly button.
No, yeah, I've heard of the belly button.
This like sounds like one of those like furry things, like where it's like like a kink, I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah. Right, it sounds
Like I've
weird,
never
but
heard of
yeah,
that.
I've heard of people taking RSO so that they don't get like they don't get the buzzy effect way
Yeah.
that you were saying, where it's just more of like a body relaxation type thing.
More
Yeah.
targeted. So maybe they're trying to go through here. So it's like a targeted.
Yeah, I mean it
Right.
makes sense, and you definitely it's always recommended that you're trying to get the cannabis product as close to what you're trying to treat as possible. So yeah, that would make sense. It kind of makes me I mean I'm definitely going to try it
She's like, I
now.
am gonna put something in my
But
belly button today.
yes, literally, I will share it. Um but I actually make my own suppositories and it's super easy. I use cocoa butter and cannabis infused coconut oil.
Okay.
And I just use like more cocoa butter than coconut oil to keep it like solidified. And I
Mhm.
keep them in
Uh-huh.
the freezer. But it's just those two things. And
Ooh.
I
And
just
so,
melt it down
oh,
together, stir it
okay.
together, and then I have molds. You can order molds or you can use like
Suppository molds.
Got
yes.
you. Or
Oh
like, yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Genius.
I'm gonna put you on. I'm gonna send you the recipe.
Yeah, do it, do
Genius.
it.
Yeah, man, because
Can we share
time
it?
can be so
Yeah.
brutal.
Yeah. Yeah. It
I'm
can be
going
for a
through it
lot of
right
people.
now.
So
That's
this is
why
like
I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah.
And okay, you're really young, but like, you're in
Mhm.
the medical field, you're dealing with maternity a lot. Like, what could you share if you know any knowledge about perimenopause? Because we're there, we're like coming up, we're approaching that. We're 42
Yes.
and we're noticing a lot of
boo.
changes and and our cycle and like the way
Yeah.
we feel, do you have anything feedback on maybe how cannabis can help in the perimenopause, phase of a
That
woman?
yes, that is Cannabirth's like next adventure is finding someone who really specializes in perimenopause. I know that anecdotally, people say cannabis helps them with menopause, but I don't have a ton of like my own knowledge or research on it. But more is needed, right? This is
Right.
why, because you can potentially mitigate your symptoms and make this transition easier for yourself by using a plant and variations of the plant and not having to switch up your, product all the time. So,
I'm
or
wondering if those suppositories are going to come in handy.
yeah, definitely.
You know what though? And that's another that brings me to my next question. What is like the a okay, because I feel like childbirth now we've gotten women have child older and older. Like we're waiting long time. But do you feel like the moms that you see mostly
Yeah.
are older? Like what is the age range of women that you usually see?
Anywhere from 25 to 35, I would say is like the average age of somebody that's seeking information. I actually have had some clients that have been on like the older side, where they're trying to get pregnant and they're 38, 39, 40, and they're looking for all the answers they can get because once you get to that point, like you're really willing to try whatever you want to try or whatever you can try to have a baby. So and that's been successful for people. So, yeah. I haven't yet encountered anyone who's like really, really young. They're usually by the time they come in contact cuz like you said, I feel like more people are just waiting longer. It's like how could you even afford, to have a kid now? So,
Awesome.
Yeah, these days.
Yeah. Yeah. And the birth rates have been going down from what I've been seeing in like headlines and stories and
interesting.
that's not just here, it's in a lot of places. People are having less kids or deciding
Yeah.
not to have kids.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely more common for my generation. I mean, the millennial generation is like, a lot of career focused people, a lot of people choosing different lifestyles, traveling over having kids, which I think is awesome because honestly, like we need women in our society that don't have kids that can support women that do and that they can look up to those moms as examples,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
as inspiration. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't want our
Yeah,
daughters
I
to
think
think,
we're
okay, that's what you're supposed to do is just become a mom. There's so many things that
Yeah.
you can be, you
right,
can be a mom
and we're
or no,
taking less
if you don't want
shit.
to be.
Right.
We're like,
Exactly.
yeah, right. If we don't see any perks out of this, we're not buying into all of that.
Yeah. Yeah, no kidding. No kidding.
So before we close up this interview, I just want to ask, what would you say is the most important thing you can do during pregnancy if you are consuming cannabis?
The most important thing that you can do is educate yourself. Educate yourself on not only the plant itself and the quality of it. A lot of people don't know what quality cannabis really is. Educate yourself on the quality of cannabis because you have to be consuming high quality medication, especially if you're breastfeeding and you're pregnant, but really any time outside of that. And then educate yourself on the laws and policies in your area. Call the hospital, ask them what their drug testing policies are. You can call completely anonymously. You can have somebody call for you if you don't want to do it, but find out because you don't want to be surprised when you get to the hospital. So, yeah, I'd say that's
Very
Very,
nice.
probably the most important two things.
very good advice. Yeah, we've heard some stories of some things that some mothers have gone through because of CPS, and you should never risk losing your kid
No.
over a plant that
No,
helps
and it
you.
as many, like, we hear a lot of stories now of people that are like, my doctor knew or my midwife knew and they were supportive and I used cannabis in labor or whatever, and that's awesome, but there's there's the whole other side of that coin, which is people that don't disclose their consumption, they do everything right, and they end up having a CPS case opened on them and their whole lives turned upside down in a month, so it's like there's definitely different experiences, and we have to honor both of them, the progress
Yeah,
that we've made and then the road that we still have to go. So,
absolutely.
Wanted to share a little bit about, before we close it up, just tell our audience a little bit about your workshops and the services that you have, and how they can get in
yeah.
touch. We'll put your socials and everything, but just give a little info about your services at Cannabirth.
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram at Cannabirth. We also have a website. Like she said, she'll put all the links in there. We have free resources, free guides for birth workers and healthcare professionals and moms. We have a first trimester checklist so that you can kind of like go down the checklist and get your cannabis consumption really, really dialed in for your pregnancy journey. I host workshops from time to time on different topics. Sometimes it's conscious consumption, sometimes it's birth worker focused. So just get on the email list and stay tuned. That's the best way to find out what's going on because my email server does not censor me the way that Instagram does. So
Right?
True.
please get on it. Yeah.
Yes. So please make sure you follow her. We, that we have to boost each other up because we're all so censored with this planet and
Yes.
social media. So, but
Yeah.
thank you so much, Sydney. This was a lot of
Yeah.
fun.
Thank
Cool.
you. We
I had fun
appreciate you.
too. Yes. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to our interview with Sydney. She had a lot to share about even like laws, because it's always kind of murky when you're consuming and
CPS.
with CPS getting involved and what
Mhm.
kind of testing. And it's really like you never really know what kind of testing they're doing because they could really pretty much be testing for anything, especially
Yeah.
when we talk about how like you want to be upfront with your
Yeah, that blew me away. Like I didn't even consider that. Just mentioning before to my doctor that I use
Right.
cannabis, how that being in my chart later on when I get pregnant might be an issue.
Right.
later
Like
down
the
the
whole
road.
fact of it coming up and
Red
being on
flag
the
to
chart
get
from
tested.
beginning. Yeah. It's something that might throw off a red flag for someone else.
I feel like that's one of the biggest fears, like she said in her survey. The biggest fears is
CPS getting involved.
CPS. Yeah, a lot of moms worry about that. That's why everyone hides in the green closet.
Yeah. So it's
It's
interesting.
understandable.
Yeah, it's definitely.
So it's federally legal.
Right, of course. And no research is going to be open about women using while they're pregnant. They don't want to have to do tests. Like it's crazy how research is biased because of the ways that things are tested.
Mhm.
A lot of times like statistics, and I heard one today where it's like the office temperature was all based on research of like a middle-aged man in a suit, and that's why it's so cold in the office. So it's like, what I'm saying? Like it's always biased what
Mhm.
this research is, and nobody's ever going to do research strictly on cannabis using mothers like while they're pregnant. So it's always really talking to people, anecdotal evidence, and it's so funny every time it goes back to that, like, the Jamaican research, that one research that was done in
Oh, the group
Jamaica.
of moms, yeah.
And then where they like interview them after the fact, and
The children are thriving.
right. So you got to get your research where you can, and you got to get it from the resources where it matches you. Like, you want to get resources.
And like she said, do your own research,
Research.
find resources,
Right.
speak to
Look
professionals.
for the information.
And this is a great resource at Cannabirth.
Yeah, absolutely. So check her out. All her social media handles on Instagram. I don't know. Throw that card back up because I can't see.
At
At
Cannabirth.
Cannabirth on Instagram,
And
and
her website is
cannabirth.co.
cannabirth.co.
Hey, see you guys next week, hopefully back here.
We hope you're enjoying the interviews. Please let us know. Give us some feedback.
Yeah, comments. We've heard from one person. We're waiting to hear from you.
All right, guys. We'll see you again next week for a regular episode. Bye.
Hasta luego.